Welcome to Commander Pop Culture, a place to gather magical information with some laughs, might I add. I call it There Will Be Blood because he makes blood tokens. From what I saw in EDH Rec, people love building this as an Angels deck, and I feel like
there's something better than this for you and
this is a flicker, death and taxes kind of deck. Now, you get a blood token for sacking any creature, but you get blood tokens based on toughness if you sack an angel. I'm running 49 creatures in this deck, so getting 6 blood tokens for this activation is not hard for me personally. I prefer to play as much as I can as fast as I can. So like playing a single angel a turn, like what EDH Rec recommends people to do, is not good enough by my standards. Unfortunately, I know that's like the popular thing, and that's what I think people want to see. If I'm going to be making recommendations, I want to be giving the best possible one, and I truly believe that the way I built this on a budget is the best way. This deck list comes out to be $82. Let's get started about what's in it. Starling Gorehound. I've always wanted to play this guy. He's super good in that whenever a creature with power 2 or less enters the battlefield under control, you surveil. So it lets you pitch things from the top of your library to your graveyard by your choice. Every time it's a creature, you say yes. For 1 mana, he should make your graveyard pretty darn big. I would say most of the creatures in this package are 2 power or less. Basically, I'm playing Shilgengar like he's a Rise of the Dark Realms for your own graveyard. Citrus Flyer, there's no better rate. For 1 mana, you mill 6 cards. Pretty darn good. Gravecrawler's in here for a loop. If you have a zombie in play, you can cast him from your graveyard, and he combos really well with Warren Soul Trader. Warren Soul Trader was a really nice godsend for this loop because previously you needed Phyrexian Altar plus another zombie and Gravecrawler. This reduces the combo by a whole card because Warren Soul Trader is also a zombie. But if you weren't sure how this wins you the game, if you have one of your Aristocrat pieces in play, like your Zulaport Cutthroat, you will break even in life loss while everyone loses a life, and you just do it, 40 times until everybody dies. Wistful Rider. At sorcery speed, you could sack him to blow up any artifact or enchantment. I appreciate it for its reach. I don't like that I have to do it at sorcery speed, but the reason why my creature package is so large is I got to fit my card advantage package and my removal package into the creature package. I got a lot of overlap. When you could have synergy with those necessary pieces to make your deck function, it feels really strong. Recurring this and doing it over and over again feels awesome. Wall of Omens for card draw, Dusk Legion Zealot for the same purpose. I like Wall of Omens more than like this 10 cents gives it credit for because it staves off a lot of aggro in the early and mid game. A lot of people don't want to just attack into you and stuff it out. You don't think this saves you a lot of damage, but if you hypothetically think about stuff, whenever you play Wall of Omens, think about all the stupid chip damage 3 other players could have taken against you, and that
really adds up.
This card removes that from the equation. Crystal Marauder, this is a new card from MH3. It's great because it forces people to sack a non-token creature. It's one of the best edict effects because most of the time when people play an edict, they just sack a crappy token, and this forces them to sacrifice something that's respectable. Leonin Relic Order, I'm going to be abusing the stack with Shilgengar with this free sack outlet. If you aren't aware about how you abuse these particular O-Ring effects, is when O-Ring first came out, the abilities were broken up, so you could layer how the triggers go on the stacks. I play Leonin, the ETB trigger goes on the stack, and then I sack it immediately, and the death trigger goes on top of the ETB trigger. The death trigger will resolve. There'll be nothing in it, so nothing returns, and then the ETB trigger resolves and the thing gets permanently exiled. And that's how it works with these O-Ring effects where the text is broken up. There's only a handful of these that do this. There's Tidehall Strix, which I'm not running because it's not impactful enough, but I am running Fiend Hunter, which exiles a creature that's in play. Dauntless Dismantler. I play budget decks on Moto, and budget in paper is a lot different budget-wise on Moto. People can play Mana Crypt for $5 on here, so it's something that I expect to deal with. So there is some application in these cards even in the real world, because nothing drives people more nuts than sitting down and getting whopped by someone because they have, 200 plus dollar cards in their decks. This kind of stuff makes you more prepared. This makes it so their artifacts come into play tapped, and you could sack it to destroy each artifact with lesser value than X. And most of the time I pick 0 and blow up all the dumb, really expensive rocks and paper that are dirt cheap on Moto to play. Elias Ilkor, this is one of your Aristocrats. Cathar Commando, it's a nice instant speed removal of an artifact or enchantment. You could make this a blocker and catch people with their pants down too. Corpse Knight, another Aristocrat piece. Cruise Celebrant, Marionette Apprentice. I feel like Aristocrats has been getting a lot of support lately. I mean, just in my 2-drop slots alone, I think I have 5 Aristocrats. Fortunately, because there's so much redundancy at that efficiency, I don't need to play the 3-drops or the 4-drops that kind of suck and make your decks and hands really clunky, which I'm very appreciative of. I only need 1 in play to win the game, and having 5 is good enough. White Knight Orchid, this lets you tutor for planes. Untap, it's one of the best in the game. It's unfortunate, I look at it as a double white mana rock. It's a 2-drop, it's just a little clunky that it's double white and that it ties up your mana if you want to string multiple spells together, but it beats playing 3 mana drop rocks any day of the week. Unmarked Grave. There is a tutor package, and I love tutor packages that utilize the graveyard, and Shilgengar is one of them. You just dump your big hitters like Grey Merchant, and you reanimate it with everything else, and hopefully that's enough to finish everybody off. Chthonian Nightmare, if you don't have a lot of experience playing against it, this thing is a brutal house. It's reoccurring Nightmare for a mana cheaper, and like the 3 energy means so little in Commander or just in Magic nowadays. Like the 3 energy isn't hindering enough because the game is so efficiently costed now. Pretty much hits everything you could possibly think of.
We're not in Kansas anymore.
I'm only missing out on like a handful of cards. I'm not running a whole lot above 3 CMC. And you can mix and match. Like you're saving energy whenever you don't bring something back that costs 3. The next time you bounce this back and replay it, you have access to 4 or 5 or whatever it is that you intend on doing, and you'll get those things every other creature. It's not a big deal. But basically what I've seen about this is it's just a value engine from hell. It gains you such an advantage that your opponents can't do anything about it after you loop a particular creature 3 or 4 times, which is easy because this only costs 2 mana. Fiend Hunter, you just layer the stacks. ETB goes on first. Death Trigger, because you sacked it in response, goes on top. Death Trigger resolves, exiling something permanently. Gravelighter, this is a nice edict effect. You could use it as a card draw option. Either or, I'm happy with it. Venture the Meek, again, we have a lot of 2-power creatures in this deck, and this thing just does a lot of work drawing you cards. I don't see it as often as I used to, but I still think it has one of the best ceilings in the game. The ceiling's based on how much mana you have access to. So in the mid to late game, it does a lot of work. In the early game, not so much, but your early game is going to be a lot of setting up anyway. It's going to be mana rocks or playing your 1 and 2 drops. So it's not like you're in a rush. Ruthless Lawbringer lets you blow up a non-land permanent by sacrificing something else. Plague Crafter, it's an edict effect. A little bit more reach in case someone doesn't have a creature, they discard a card. Pretty nice. It also could hit Planeswalkers. Big Game Hunter has Madness, a destroy creature, power 4 greater. Because I am playing in casual lobbies, Big Game Hunter tends to hit a fair amount of things. Midnight Reaper for card draw, costs you a life though. Guide Clay Evaporation, one of the best removal pieces on a creature. So lets you exile any non-land permanent for 4 CMC or less. It's stronger in CDH because everyone has a low curve. A little bit weaker in casual tables, but that reach makes up the difference. Buried Alive, one of your best tutors. Ditch your 3 best creatures in your graveyard. Stinkweed Imp, it's a good rate for milling yourself. You replace your draw step and dredge 5, means you mill 5. Orbed Opportunist, because your commander is a free sack outlet, you could layer your sack triggers on other people's turns and guarantee that you see a card every single turn. One of the better applications of Morbid Opportunist to see people play this just because. Priest of Gix, this is actually part of an infinite loop. Because Shilgengar's activated ability is triple black or triple white, if I have a pile of creatures and Priest of Gix is in that mix, I can make an infinite loop if I loop the right particular creature, which I haven't revealed yet, but there are a handful of them. Glorious Protector is one of them. This lets you reset the finality counters. He puts a finality counter on things that he brings back. Should that creature die with a finality counter on it, it gets exiled instead of going back to your graveyard. This thing lets you exile your stuff and bring them back so they don't have the finale counters on it, and then you loop your stuff over and over again.
What
diabolical plan.
We'll go back to the 3 drops. Grim Horsex, another cantripper off of things dying. Floor in the 3rd path. It's nice. You get to pull up an artifact or enchantment, and then you could tap it to make an opponent and you draw a card. Always pick the weakest player to draw with you. That way you don't give the people ahead of you any more advantage than they already have. And if you're not the best at assessing boards, I would say you shouldn't play Lauren. Like if you're a brand new player, I don't recommend people play Lorem. I see that quite often, unfortunately. Solemnity is in the deck. That means I don't have to do the Glorious Protector shenanigans, and then the finale counters don't get on and I loop my creatures over and over again. That's perfectly fine. If I turn off my own Nightmare, it's far less effective because Shilgengar lets me bring back as many as I want. So I think it's definitely worth a non-bow. Delny's Streetwise Lookout. She's awesome, and that creature's power 2 or less can't be blocked by creature's power 3 or greater. So again, that 2 power is coming up again. If you need to get chip damage, I mean, people can get low enough where this can't be blocked clause might be important. But the reason why she's in here is she's just a strictly better Panharmonicon because you get her out earlier. Turn 4 do nothing doesn't feel great in Commander anymore. I still think Panharmonicon has a place in EDH. I still think it's strong, but when I originally built this deck, I had a lot of money left over and I was like, I haven't played Delny yet. I'm gonna give it a shot. Normally this is way out of budget and I wouldn't even consider it, but the beauty of Aristocrats is you could build it for dirt cheap and you could have stuff like this in the deck. Grim Savant lets you tutor for a card that's less than your devotion to black. I just like that it's on a body and I could reuse it over and over again. Ravenous Chupacabra to kill something. Violent Tumor to tutor one of your best cards in your graveyard. I also like it that it has dot touch, so you deter a bunch of aggro. Golden Argosy, this is another one of your finale counter resetters. You have to overcrew it. It may only have a crew clause of 1, but you need to crew it with multiple creatures so you could flicker them all and reset the counters. They don't come back till end step, but it's worth it. Especially since you could activate Shilgengar at instant speed. It really doesn't matter that they come back on end step. Alms Collector, this is the deal with farm decks. In terms of the 3 decks I built and am playing tonight, this is probably my favorite one because it has some great hate bears. The most powerful effects in Magic or in EDH is tutoring your library, followed by drawing an excessive amount of cards. Alms Collector just puts that into check. Now, if they're drawing 1 card at a time with something like Ristic Study, it does nothing. But most of the time, people are drawing multiples of cards in one go. Abdel, this is one of your finale resets. You select any number of permanents. You create 1/1 soldiers from your exile, so that's kind of fun.
Welcome to my party.
Not only do you get to reset the finale counters, get a bunch of UTB triggers, but you also get to make your board incredibly wide. Champion of Dusk. Another fun fact is Shilgengar turns all the things you bring back into vampires. So the Champion of Dusk will draw you a ton of cards. It will draw you X cards and cause you to lose X life, where X is the number of vampires you control. So when it goes to look that everything is a vampire, it will indeed see that all your creatures are vampires. I guess the cool part about my list is I would say 90% of this list is not recommended on EDH Rec because the popular thing is just building dumb angels. You miss out on diamonds in a rough like Champion of Dusk. Lumbering Battlement, which is another one of my pieces for resetting the finale counters. Karmic Guide, this is part of the loop with Revelark. I haven't played this loop in a while, but they effectively get each other. You sack the Revelark, you get Karmic Guide back. Karmic Guide brings back Revelark. Before the Revelark trigger happens, you sack the Karmic Guide, and you get infinite death triggers for your Aristocrat. Doom Whisperer, you pay 2 life to Surveil 2. This is just to fuel up your graveyard as big as you need it to, right before you activate the Shilgengar. Angel of Suffering is really fun. This is one of the very few angels. I'm only running 2 in this list. This one, whenever damage is dealt to you, you mill twice that many cards. You could mill yourself out, but that is a risk I am willing to take. When this card came out or was spoiled in New Capenna, I thought it would be worth so much more. It's so powerful and it's a mythic. In the right circumstances, you can activate Shilgengar in response to your draw trigger. That might be in all the time you need to close out the game when you have a graveyard that's full of 100 cards. Is not a big deal in that scenario. Harvest of Souls to draw every time a non-token creature dies. This also affects your opponent's creatures. I see people miss that draw trigger all the time in paper. Massacre Worm. This is a one-sided board wipe that affects your opponents. For every little rinky-dink thing you kill of theirs, they lose 2 life. Pretty darn brutal. Thief of Blood, this is another one of your finality counter resetters. On ETB, you remove all counters from all permanents. This is my 4th or 5th way to abuse the finality counters. Pretty consistently, you could abuse the finality counter removal. I didn't even know this thing existed. This thing was printed in Commander 14. Never played it before, but oh my goodness, it is perfect in this deck. Angel of Ruins, I like this because I could pitch it to go plane cycling, fill up my graveyard with a significant body that has a significant ETB trigger to exile artifacts or enchantments. My lands are just fixing, and I have random Ghost Quarter. Play it out, see what happens.
There will be blood tonight.